Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Vigilante Hikari, written by 2021 Knight. You can find his profile link in the description. Let's begin. Wondering of why the doctor shook his head, Inko asked, "Sir, what's wrong?" The doctor sighed and answered, "This boy doesn't have a quirk." Those words brought down Midoriya's spirit. No, it broke them. He had such high hopes about being a hero along with his childhood, but to find out that he was quirkless and that he was no hope for him to become a hero, it was just crushing. He wondered how his friend would react about him not becoming a hero along with him. Would he destroy their friendship and abandon him? Would he hate him? There were too many worries flooding through his thoughts, and by the time he was out of them, he already left the room and was with the Bakugos. Bakugo was waving his hand in front of Midoriya to see if he was even there, but he never responded. Midoriya looked left to right to that he was back in the car and heading back to Bakugo's house. He faced Bakugo, who was still staring at him, wondering why he was spacing out. "Are you back, Deku?" he questioned. Midoriya nodded. "Finally. Anyway, my quirk is explosions. I can create explosions from my hands. Cool, isn't it? So, what's your quirk?" The car was silent, waiting for his answer, but Midoriya only answered the question in a mutter. "I don't have one." "What was that?" Bakugo asked. Tears were falling from his eyes and were creating a river. Bakugo's eye widened and looked around, not knowing what to do or what was wrong. Midoriya repeated himself, but it was louder so they could all hear him. "I don't have a quirk," Midoriya said with his eyes shut and was crying tears, while he was trying to wipe them away. The Bakugos, who haven't heard the news, were quite shocked. "I'm sorry, Kaken, but I am so weak that I don't even have a quirk for myself. How can I even become a hero to protect others, when I can't even protect myself? I can't become a hero." Bakugo frowned and slapped Midoriya on the head. Midoriya winced at the sudden smack, and parents who heard the smack was concerned about what was happening. Mitsuki was about to yell at her idiot son, but Inko stopped her. Mitsuki saw from the corner of her eyes that she was shaking her head, so she remained quiet. "Are you stupid?" Bakugo spoke as he frowned and crossed his arms. Midoriya held his head with both hands and looked up with teary eyes. "So what if you don't have a quirk? You can beat those FAs that have quirks. You can train your body and beat the SHT out of them. You can become the first quirkless hero. You just have to train harder than those son of a beaches. I know you can do it, Deku, just don't ever give up on your dream just because you don't have a quirk." Midoriya's eyes started to let tears run down his face, and he leaned towards the bot next to him. "Kaken!" he screamed as he hugged the bot in tears. Bakugo looked at him and was surprised. He let the green-haired hug him as he cried. "I won't give up and I will train harder to be a hero." Bakugo smirked at stated and patted Midoriya on his head. The two mothers were happy that Midoriya didn't give up on his dreams, but Mitsuki was mad. "Brat! Where did you learn those words from?" she asked. Unamused, Bakugo answered, "From you old hag." "What did you say, you shitty brat?" "There, see. Mother, what does shitty mean?" Also Kaken also said some unfamiliar words. "What do they mean?" Midoriya questioned. Inko looked back and was hesitant and replied, "Nothing you need to know, dear." "But." "No buts. That's final." Inko said. "Fine." Years later, the friends were 7 and they trained to become the hero that saves many people. Midoriya continued his hero analysis, thinking and using techniques that he could use to fight. He was smart for his age and was tutoring his childhood friend. He only had one friend, which was Bakugo, since people would stay away from him or bully him when they found out that he was quirkless. They would mentally bully him and sometimes physically bully him, but that they used their quirks on him, but Midoriya only endured. Teachers wouldn't believe him, after all, he was quirkless. He didn't tell anyone that he was being bullied, not even his mother, but Bakugo was in his class and school, he knew. He was always near Midoriya when he could help it, since other kids didn't bully him when Bakugo was around. He had a powerful quirk after all, and he was the most powerful student at school. When Bakugo wasn't around, people took the chance to bully the broccoli, and Izuku only thought of it as training for endurance. It was also good for his pain tolerance. It was training to him, and to convince himself, he repeated that line multiple times in his head while getting beaten up. After the bullying was done, Midoriya did his best to cover all the injuries up with bandages and came up with excuses for his mother. As long as his mother and the Bakugo family was with him, he was fine. One day, the Midoriyas were walking home after going to buy groceries. They were chatting happily, but then a random person grabbed Inko by the wrist and pulled her towards him. Midoriya faced towards the direction of where his mother was pulled and saw that a knife was against his mother's neck and a gun facing towards the crowd. There were gasps and heroes rushed to the scene. They were activating their quirks and ready to attack. "Don't move, or this woman gets it. Let me go and I set her free," the villain shouted. Inko was grabbing the arm of the villain, trying to set herself free, and Midoriya was afraid for his mother's life. He turned and saw the heroes weren't standing down. They continued to walk closer to the villain without taking regard for Inko. "I said don't move. If you continue, I will use my quirk," the villain yelled. The heroes didn't listen to the warning, and there was a loud ticking sound. It was coming from the villain, and Inko, realizing what was going to happen, just smiled towards her 7-year-old boy and mouthed, "Love you." The villain blew up and Midoriya was left crying on his knees. The civilians who were in a 5 meter of the villain were also blown up with the cause. The heroes were still there and just dropped their guard. Midoriya heard them saying, "Well, that's that." One of them said, "Well, those people were just sacrifices to get rid of the villain." Another responded, "Yeah. Better them than us. Those were only small lives that saved many others." While crying, Midoriya thought as he cried on his knees, "My mother had to be a sacrifice along with another 50 people, because you couldn't even do your job properly. Isn't your job to protect civilians? It wasn't my mother's job nor the others who died. It was yours. You should be ready and willing to die for the people who you are responsible to protect. If this was how heroes do things, then I will have to break my dream and twist it. I refuse to be like those heroes. I will save lives even if it costs my life. I will be a true hero that saves people with putting my life on the line to protect them." After the heroes left, Midoriya ran home and packed his bag. He knew that the accident would be on the news, so he also wrote a note to the Bakugos. He left it on the desk and started to bag. He brought a huge bag and grabbed all the money he could find in the house. He grabbed clothes and some things to keep him busy, like books, pencils, devices, and his notebooks. He made sure to grab all his notebooks, so he could continue his training. Before leaving the house, he looked back at the empty house and wished his home goodbye, along with his mother. He exited the house and left to start his journey. His new way of life was only beginning. Walking through a dark alleyway, Midoriya was wearing a hood to cover his head and was carrying his bag on his back. He kept head down and hands in his pocket. I didn't anyone in sight and continued to walk through the alleyway. It was empty and silent, but Midoriya continued to walk down the path he had chosen. He continued to walk until he found an abandoned school. It was a 3-story building and it was a bit destroyed. There were other destroyed buildings around it. He had been walking for the whole day, so he needed to find a place to live. Of course, he had to change locations every once a while, but he thought that the school would be a good enough place for him to live. He had cash on him and he also might need to find work to gain more. He had to buy some wigs and contacts to keep his identity a secret. Midoriya entered the building and went up to the 3rd floor. It was dusty and dirty, but Midoriya didn't really care. It was going to be his new home for now. Midoriya walked into a classroom and placed his bag in a table. He pulled out a chair and sat on it. He opened his bag and took out his notebooks. He planned to not do anything until it has been a week since he should be reported as missing, so during that time, he has nothing else to do but train. He reread Eraserhead's fighting styles and moved all the table and chairs in the classroom to one side. He left one alone at the back, so he had somewhere to sit and use as a desk. By imitating Eraserhead's hand-to-hand combat, it gave Midoriya some ideas for his own style. He immediately jotted his ideas on paper and went back to rereading the notes he had took. When the incident at the mall was on the news, it listed all the people dead from the attack. The Bakugos were concerned. Mitsuki and Bakugo headed to their car and went towards the Midoriya home. Once they got there, the door was closed, but when they went to twist the knob, it opened. They just walked inside worried for Midoriya about the news on the TV, but they didn't see him. His room had open drawers and things missing from it. The Bakugos frowned and continued to search for any clue they could use to find the green-haired boy. Mitsuki left the bedroom, but Bakugo continued to look around. He checked for the notebook he saw his childhood friend would always write in, but it wasn't there. He checked the drawers and found some clothes missing from their spot. Then he was faced to the desk. Some pencils were missing and there was a folded sheet of paper that had a drawing of what should be an explosion along with a necklace on the side of it. Curious of what it was, Bakugo picked up the piece of paper and opened it. It said, "Dear Kaken, you should be reading this, since it has your explosion mark on it, but if you're not, then please stop reading and hand it over to Kaken. Anyway, if you're here then you probably saw the incident on the news." I don't know how they explained it, but the truth was that heroes didn't take the warnings of the villain properly and Mother was caught hostage. The villain warned them twice, but the heroes still didn't listen. So he blew himself up, along with my mother. Afterwards, the heroes said something unforgivable. "I'm going and I don't want you to look for me, Kaken. I don't want to cause trouble and I hope that you'll become a great hero, Kaken. The necklace on the desk is for you. Please take care and stay safe." From Izuku Midoriya/Deku Bakugo stared at the paper and a single tear ran down his cheek. They were Midoriya didn't have to go by himself and do whatever he was going to do. He should been able to continue to live peaceful with his mother. Bakugo shoved the piece of paper in his pocket and grabbed a necklace that was also laying on the desk. The necklace was a green 4-leaf clover. Bakugo wore it and tucked it into his shirt. They said that 4-leaf clovers should be able to give people luck and if Bakugo was going to try and find his stupid childhood friend, he would need it. Bakugo went over to his mother and saw her panicking. "Katsuki, what are we going to do? Izuku's missing and we don't know where he might be." "Calm your tips, old hag," Bakugo said as he showed his mother the piece of paper. Deku ran away. After reading the little letter, Mitsuki sighed. At least we know that he left of his own free will and not kidnapped. Also, what necklace? Bakugo took out the necklace from underneath his shirt. His mother looked at it and smiled sadly. She noticed something that her son hadn't. In very small writing, there was a small carve saying, "Deku and Kaken." Mitsuki grabbed Bakugo's hand and they both walked out of the Midoriya household. They headed back home and Mitsuki filed a missing report to the police while Bakugo headed back to his room. He laid in his bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought to himself, if the shitty nerd wants to find, then I'm just going to find him. Let's start now. The letter is my first clue, but where else might that SHT nerd be? Whatever, let's just find him. The police might even find him before me anyway. That was Bakugo's hopes, but in the end the police gave up on looking for him after 3 days. Their excuse was that they didn't have time to look for a quirkless boy who had nowhere to go. It made the Bakugos furious. The boy was only 7 years old and adults gave up on looking for him. It wasn't right. At that moment, Bakugo decided to not let anyone do it. If you want something to be done, you got to do it yourself. From then on, Bakugo found as many clues as he could about the whereabouts of the broccoli boy, while studying and training to become a hero. Because of that, Bakugo became distant and got an attitude. He didn't have any true friends. There were people calling themselves his friends, but they only cared about him since he had a great quirk. It set him off, and before he knew it, he was at the age of 15 signing up to enter UA. Midoriya trained his body to become stronger and bought some wigs and contacts to cover his identity. He learned things in the library. He knew it was important to have some brains if he wanted to get through with the world. It was hard to buy food, since he tried to find a job, but no one took him because he was underage. In the end, he gave up and just found food around and buy something cheap with the money he had got. He created his own suit and planned to save people, but he had to use most of his money for that reason alone. He studied from the library and he had a high IQ, soon it wasn't impossible for him. Hemade, a mask that covered his whole face. His costume is like canon, but he has a cape to cover his mouth. Midoriya happy about his costume, but he needed to put it on. Once it was on, it felt right for him. When he finished building his costume, it had been already 1 year since his mother's death. It was time for him to save people, so they wouldn't have the same fate as his mother. From then on, the vigilante Hikari was born. He saved people and endangered his life to save others. He worked in the shadows and captured villains. He handed them over to the police when he was done with them, and the police didn't know what he looked like. They heard their voice, but Midoriya was smart enough to make sure that he had a voice changer. They couldn't find his identity and thought that he was at least 20, since they thought the way he fought was too good for someone younger. It was all thanks to Midoriya's training, and his efforts were rewarded with the people who he saved gave him food in front of an alleyway. Midoriya didn't show himself to anyone when there was no danger. The problem of food was solved, thanks to the people he had saved, and he was grateful for them. Heroes were after him, but they could never catch him. He was all over the news when he captured a new villain and handed them over to the police, more like dropped them in front of the station. People in Japan knew the vigilante Hikari, but they didn't know the person behind the mask. Midoriya was satisfied about how he was doing and was teasing the heroes whenever he escaped from their grasps. He would play pranks on them and he found it amusing, especially Eraserhead's reaction. It had been like that for years. Hikari capturing villains and saving civilians in the dark and dropping them off at the police station. Playing with heroes and spotting Eraserhead everywhere, but was always able to shake him off. Midoriya enjoyed it like that, and he wished that he could do it forever. It brought him a sense of happiness. Midoriya was now, it had been 8 years since he started his job. 8 years since he was on his own. 8 years since his mother died. Hikari was standing on top of a building, looking down towards the city below him. It was night and the city lights lighted up the city into bright and appealing colors. As he admired the view he was getting, someone was closing up on him. Hikari could sense him, but didn't pay any mind. It was probably the same old geezer who had been tracing him down for years. Hikari. The person called out. Hikari was still facing the opposite way, but answered, "Hello, Eraserhead. How are you doing on this fine night?" "Tired, since you still haven't been caught." The tired hero replied. The vigilante giggled. "Then I guess you will always be tired." Izuku sighed. "Just turn yourself in." "Never." The masked vigilante said. "You probably go to jail for a couple of years, but after that you can get a real job." Izuku stated as he crossed his arms. Hikari faced the man. "How old do you think I am?" "I don't know. Maybe late 20s or early 30s. Hikari stopped himself from giggling. Izuku was there wondering what was funny, but just sighed it off. Izuku stood at least 5 meters away from the vigilante because any closer, the guy would escape and run away. "Anyway, Eraserhead, I heard you're going to actually try and teach a class this year. You're not expelling them all like last year." Izuku let out a frustrated sigh. Nizu doesn't want the rates of future heroes riding to decrease. "But I say, if they have no potential, then they shouldn't even become heroes." Hikari laughed. "I guess, but make sure they got the heart of a hero." "You always say that, but I don't understand why. So tell me, why you always want heroes to have a heart of one. Aizawa commented. This time it was Hikari's time. Okay, sigh. He did it sadly and explained while looking towards the city. 8 years ago. My mother died of a villain attack. She was the hostage, yet the villain gave multiple warnings. The heroes didn't even listen and the villain blew himself up along with my mother and at least 50 other people. After the event was over, the heroes called them necessary sacrifices that needed to be made to stop the villain. Isn't it the heroes' job to sacrifice themselves to protect civilians? Aizawa was speechless. The person in front of him was right. It wasn't the civilian's job to stop a villain, but a hero's. He could now see why the vigilante Hikari came to light. I promised myself that I would save the weak and put my life on the line for that reason. He continued to explain as he had flashbacks of when he got hurt multiple times just to save a person. I promised myself that I would protect people so they don't have to die. I didn't want to be a hero if they were like that. I wanted to defeat villains without having civilians dying for that cause. So I became Hikari. The light that will be shown in the darkest times. I will save them, even if I die. This person has a heart of a hero. Aizawa thought. He has potential, a heart of a hero and good at it. Too bad he became a vigilante. Anyway, Eraserhead, I have to go. I think you will see many potential in the upcoming exam, but never forget, it is always about the heart than the strength for someone to become a hero. Hikari said as he jumped off roof to roof leaving the pro-hero staring. Aizawa sighed and grinned. After he hopped away to get some rest. Midoriya was back in the abandoned school, which he had been living in for 8 years. It was surprising that no one ever went to the building. No pro-hero or police checked this place, which Midoriya didn't really care as long as he wasn't found. To keep himself busy, he would train and come up with new styles, so the heroes can't predict what move he was going to do next. Midoriya kind of enjoyed how he was able to live. It didn't matter that he was living on a destroyed building, but he was able to save many people. They even gave him food and placed it outside any alleyway, which he thought was stupid, but in consideration for him, he thought it was nice. He would gladly eat the food and always made sure that the plate or whatever container it was in, was back to where it was when he found it. When people saw that the food was missing and the container was still there with a little smiley face on it, they became happy. Especially children. They thought he was related to Santa, since the jolly old man would eat the cookies and drink the milk they left out for him. Staring at the ceiling, he pulled out a pic from his bag. It was the one where his mother, Bakugo, and his mother were in it with him. He smiled fondly over the picture. It was a summer day when they took it. He was 5 and everyone in the photo was smiling. Inko and Mitsuki had their son sit in their lap and they were sitting under a great big tree surrounded with green healthy grass. When looking at the photo, Midoriya wondered how the Bakugos were doing. He remembered that Bakugo wanted to be a hero and that they were going to become one together. Sorry Kaken. I didn't keep my promise, did I? Midoriya placed the photo carefully down and decided to go see how they were doing. He put on his costume and placed his mask on his face. He hopped out the school window and dashed towards the Bakugo house. Once reaching there, Midoriya was at the window. He could see through it and saw Bakugo's parents in the living room. They were sitting on the couch and were smiling as they talked to each other. Midoriya slowly smiled to himself, happy to see that they were doing fine. Next was to check up on his childhood friend. He climbed a tree, making sure there was no sound or sight of him. When he reached Bakugo's window, he saw him in his room and was pacing up and down. He was whispering angrily and was facing a pin board. Midoriya squinted his eyes to look and reading on what was on the pin board and saw his name. There were threads connecting dots and photos with sticky notes. Midoriya sighed. If he remembered correctly, he said not to look for him, but look. Bakugo did anyway. Even though he felt that way, he was happy that Bakugo didn't forget him. As Midoriya looked at how much his childhood friend had grown, something caught his eye. It was a 4-leaf clover. Necklace that Bakugo was wearing. Midoriya smiled. He was glad that Bakugo still had the necklace. Truth be told, it was supposed to be Bakugo's 8th birthday gift, but thanks to the accident, Midoriya never gave it to him in person. It was supposed to give Bakugo luck and happiness for the future. Once Midoriya was satisfied with seeing the Bakugos, he headed back to the abandoned school to get some sleep before dawn arrived. After a few nights, Midoriya was patrolling the area for any villains as Hikari, but it seemed peaceful enough. He hopped from roof to roof while looking below for any activity, but there was none. He decided to stop and take a rest on top of a building. He sat at the edge and once again stared down towards the City of Lights. Sensing some presence behind him, Hikari sat up and looked towards the shadows. Though he didn't need to, since Eraserhead wasn't alone. In his scarf there a white chimera of a rat bear dog thing. There next to him was the pro-heroes Midnight and Present Mike. Aizawa was in the shadows, but with others with him, it wasn't hard to find him, even though to Hikari, he could sense him immediately. "What brings you here?" Hikari asked with his back towards them. Midnight and Present Mike, not knowing that he didn't like anyone getting close to him, walked further and closer to the sitting teen. Hikari stood up and jumped onto the next roof. The two stopped walking and looked confused. Aizawa had to explain to them that Hikari didn't let anyone closer to him than 5 meters, other than when he was fighting. "Hikari!" Nizu shouted. "I have a request for you." This perked Hikari's ears. What would have the principal of a hero school want his help with? They could have asked pro-heroes to do it, so why him? Hikari turned, showing his black and red fox mask. "Why would a principal of a hero school need to ask something off me?" Nizu hopped off Aizawa and walked to the edge of the building, trying to get close to the Vigilante. There was an alleyway in between them, but that didn't stop the request from reaching the teen's ears. "You see, UA was invaded by the press, but I have a feeling that the incident was no mistake." Nizu explained. "And why is that?" questioned Hikari as his arms slowly crossed together. "Because the press wouldn't do something like this. They might be pushy, but they wouldn't go as far to destroy UA's security system." Nizu answered. Hikari nodded, showing he understood. "I guess, but what are you trying to suggest? A villain broke in?" Nizu sighed. "Yes. I think that is true. I didn't see anything wrong with the school, but I think they could have taken a photo of some document. They might be after something or someone." "I see," Hikari replied. "Why not ask the pro-heroes to investigate? They would protect the future heroes, wouldn't they?" Aizawa jumped in. "That's the thing. We don't have enough evidence to call an investigation. That's why we are asking you to help us." "Me? As in the top vigilante in the area?" Hikari. "Yes, you. Nizu thinks you can do it." Aizawa sighed. Hikari looked back to the chimera. "Why me? I understand not letting other pro-heroes investigate, but why not your staff?" Nizu smiled. "Because my staff have to teach the students and I'm busy doing other stuff. Also you, because I know about all the interesting stuff you did. For example, when you hacked into the police database to get some information on villains and you even hacked UA. I don't know why, but it seemed fine, since you really didn't do anything. You just got into it and left." The pro-heroes Nizu was with widened their eyes. They didn't know about it and thought the vigilante had to be pretty smart to break through Nizu's coding. On the other hand, the teen was wondering when he had done that. He knew the part about hacking into the police database, since he still did it, but hacking into UA. After a few minutes to think, it hit him. It was one afternoon when he thought he should take a break from training and do something else. He didn't know what to do, so he went onto a laptop he had built and looked through files and data from when he hacked the police station. After looking through it, he remembered that the system wasn't well created, so he wanted a challenge. Once he thought about the UA system, he remembered that a pro-hero should have created it, so he thought it was going to be challenging, and he was correct. It was hard to crack, but after an hour he did it. After he escaped and closed his laptop and decided to go back to training. Though that was 2 years ago. Oh, you still remember that? Hikari asked. It was like 2 years ago. Of course. Nizu exclaimed. It was the first time UA had ever been hacked. I had a hard time searching but I found you anyway. Hikari sighed. Are you sure that you need to investigate? I mean, how would you know that I won't betray you? Nizu nodded. Yes. If you could. I heard your little backstory from Aizawa and can tell that you have a heart of gold. It was a shame that you couldn't become a hero, but with this you would be helping the heroes. It's like what you're doing now, but without any worries about heroes. Also we can get the heroes on my side to stop trying to capture you. For example, my staff and any past student of UA. It would be like a truce. I would like you to shine light onto the investigation, just like how your name means. So, it's like I'm working for you. Hikari whispered to himself, but he had to agree that it was a good deal for him. Most of the powerful and big-shot heroes were students of UA, and if they stopped trying to capture him, it would mean that he wouldn't have to worry about them. He sighed and gave his answer. All right. You have a deal. Great. Nizu shouted. Aizawa, you don't have to try and capture him anymore. Finally. They heard Aizawa's comment. I can have more sleeping hours without having to chase him all over the city. Hahaha, sorry about that, Eraserhead. Hikari apologized with his hands together as he bowed at the angle of 90 with his head down. Anyway, since we are working together, can we see your identity? Midnight asked eagerly. Once Hikari was back to standing straight, he froze. Why? Because we are working together now, Hikari. Nizu answered. It can just stay between us 5, but we have to at least know what you look like, so when you're in trouble we know who are and rescue you. Hikari thought it over. He didn't know who was dealing with and he had no information, so he could get into a lot of trouble. It sounded reasonable and it would only be between 4 pro heroes. After thinking it over, Hikari sighed and jumped over to the building the heroes were on. Fine, but it stays between us. The heroes looked intense as Hikari was removing his mask and hood. The vigilante that all the heroes were trying to catch in 8 years was about to reveal himself. The mask fell off and revealed bright emerald eyes, with green fluffy hair and freckles. The heroes gasped at how young the vigilante really was. He wasn't as old as the rumors and theories were. They thought he would at least be in his late 20s or early 30s, but oh boy, how wrong they were. In front of them was a teen, which didn't look much older than, let me introduce myself properly. Midoriya said as he bowed with the mask in his right hand. He was at a bow in 90 degrees and his head facing the ground. He stood up straight once more to meet back with the shocked faces of the pro heroes. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Quirkless. Age 16 and have been working as a vigilante for 8 years. You're 16 and quirkless. They yelled. Midoriya stared at them calmly. Yes. Is there a problem? I thought you were supposed to be at least our age. Exclaimed Present Mike, sorry for disappointing you, but I'm not. Wait, does that mean you started to be a vigilante at 7 years old? Midnight asked. Midoriya nodded. Yes. After I lost my mother, I didn't have anywhere to go and I wanted to help people, not go to an orphanage. So I became a vigilante. 8 years ago, I couldn't even catch a 7-year-old. Aizawa yelled, frustrated at himself to let a 7-year-old beat him and escape. Nizu commented, I always wondered why you were so short. Midoriya stared at Nizu and pouted with his arms crossed. I'm not short. Believe what you want. Nizu replied. After the pro heroes calmed down, Midoriya spoke once more. After finding out my age and who I am, you still want me to do the investigation. Nizu sighed. This again. I don't care about age or if you're quirkless. All I want is your skills. Great. Midoriya exclaimed as he placed his mask back on his face and covered his hair with his hood. But, Nizu continued. You're not under any adult, so you will have to be adopted by one of us here. Luckily I have chosen Aizawa. Eraserhead yelled, why me? Simple. Because you and Present Mike both know his identity and you have known him the longest, since you kept chasing him trying to capture him. Nizu explained. Aizawa turned towards his husband and saw him smiling like a goof. What about our son, Shinso? Oh, he doesn't need to know, but it's up to you and Hikari over here to decide if you want to tell him. Nizu answered. Aizawa sighed. Fine. We will look after Problem Child. Problem Child? Midoriya questioned. Yes. Problem Child. Aizawa repeated. Well then. It's settled. Nizu exclaimed. Hikari, please start the investigation when you have finished settling into your new family. Midoriya gulped. Right, the heroes and our vigilante headed towards an abandoned school, which the pro-heroes thought it was weird. They were walking into a dark and silent alleyway. The heroes, which were unfamiliar with the space, were on guard and ready to attack at any time, while Hikari was just walking without any guard put up. Once reaching into an area of destroyed buildings. Eyes were widened and the heroes dropped their guard. They stopped and stared at the sight in front of them. They didn't speak or make a sound as the fox-masked vigilante headed into the destroyed school. The heroes stood outside still studying their surroundings, and once they were snapped out of it, Midoriya came out of the building with a full backpack. He wasn't in his costume and had his mask off his face. The green-haired boy was carrying somethings, but his was small. The heroes stared at the boy as he was coming closer. Are we going? He asked as he stopping in front of the frozen heroes. Yeah, Aizawa replied, but what happened here? Midoriya shrugged. I don't know. It was like this when I first came here. You mean it's been like this for 8 years? Questioned Midnight. Midoriya simply nodded. No one comes here, since it's so destroyed and most people don't even know about this place. That's why I choose to live here. Well, it is isolated. Present Mike commented. Nizu whispered to himself. I need to look through this. Anyway, we should go. Midoriya said. The pro-heroes agreed and they walked outside to the alleyway. Once they were out, they made a side trip to UA. It was dark, so there was no one in the building, but the 5 of them. Midnight and Nizu stayed at the school and the 3 headed back out. They made their way to a house that wasn't big nor small, but it looked like it could fit a family in it. Once they were in front of the house, the couple walked towards the door to open it. Midoriya just stood in front of house and stared at it. Thoughts and questions were running through his head, which felt like hours, but the door was opened in a few minutes and Midoriya had to step in. They walked through the doorway as Present Mike, which was now Hisashi, since he wasn't in his hero costume anymore, was locking the door. As they made it to the kitchen and the living room, footsteps could be heard coming down the stairs. The attention faced the stairs and there was a purple-haired boy, with the same eye bags as Aizawa on the staircase. There was a few silent stares at each other as the boy continued to walk down the stairs, but his eye contact never left Midoriya. Dad, who's this? The boy asked. Aizawa sighed. Meet your new brother. Brother. Repeated Shinso. Aizawa nodded. Problem Child, introduce yourself to my son. Midoriya nodded and faced Shinso. He bowed at a 90-degree angle and introduced himself with a smile. Hello Shinso-kun. I am Izuku Midoriya, but you can just call me Izuku. Shinso frowned. Dad, why did you bring this guy here? Hisashi came back from the door and saw everyone standing in the living room. He leaned against the door and waited for Aizawa's answer. He's got nowhere to go and live. Aizawa replied. Then why not send him to the orphanage? Shinso questioned as he was still glaring at the newcomer. Aizawa frowned and looked at Shinso. Shinso, he has nowhere to go and people won't treat him fairly. And why is that? Is it because he has a powerful quirk and is cocky about it? Shinso countered. Aizawa sighed in frustration. It's because he doesn't have a quirk. Shinso's eyes widened and looked at his dad. He never met anyone who didn't have a quirk. He thought that his dad must be lying, so he faced his other father. His expression couldn't be seen since his head was down, so he faced the newcomer. It was confirmed with the look and reaction of Midoriya. His head was looking towards the ground as his eyes looked dark and misty. There was silence as Shinso was feeling a bit guilty. He had showed his unpleasant side to his new brother and was pretty clear that he didn't want anything to do with him. But that was only because he thought that he had a great and powerful quirk that would be compared towards himself and would bully him like all the rest had done. Even though he was now in UA's hero course, it still didn't stop the words that pierce his heart like knives from coming towards him. He whispered, "I'm sorry. I just thought that you might look down on me because of my quirk." Midoriya lifted his head and smiled softly. "It's okay, Hitoshi Shinso. I understand how you feel. Not just understand, you probably had worst." Shinso said. "Wait, how do you know my name?" Midoriya's eyes gave a quick evil glint. "It's because I have to learn all about my chasers, so I do my research." "Chasers? Wait a minute. Does that mean you know a lot of things about me?" Aizawa exclaimed. Midoriya faced the adult and grinned evilly. "Not just some things. All of them." Aizawa's sweat dropped as Midoriya continued. "I also researched your husband and all the heroes in UA, since it has powerful heroes from there, and I think that many more powerful heroes will emerge. So when I get captured, I might use some blackmail." The heroes in the room grew pale and sweat dropped while Shinso looked between the adults and his new brother in confusion. What are we talking about?" Shinso asked. Aizawa sighed and questioned, "Do we tell him?" "Well, Nizu did say that it really didn't matter if we tell him or not. After all, I might be disappearing a lot and it would be safer to tell him now instead of him getting curious and try to follow me. Just make sure that he doesn't spill the beans." Midoriya explained. "Explain what?" Hizashi spoke up. "Hitoshi, whatever we are telling you, you must never tell anyone and please not to look and act different to Midoriya. Promise." Shinso was still confused, but answered, "Promise." Aizawa explained the whole situation to Shinso and he only grew more and more surprised. They all sat in the living room as the story was being told. Midoriya had already placed his stuff on the ground and leaned against the wall with his eyes closed as he listened to Aizawa's explanation. At the end of the explanation, no made a sound. They decided to let Shinso speak up his thoughts to get them out. Shinso started, "So, you're telling me that the person who you brought into the house, which looks like my age not looks, is." Midoriya corrected. "Right, is my age, is the famous Vigilante Hikari and will be helping UA. Is that correct?" Shinso asked. "Pretty much." Midoriya replied. "And he is my brother." "Yes." Midoriya sighed. "That's amazing." Shinso exclaimed as he stood up from his seat. "You're quirkless, yet you're already helping a lot of people. You have to teach me how to become a better hero." Midoriya smiled and walked up to Shinso. He placed his hand in front of him, but Shinso stared at it. "Deal, but let's see if you have a heart of a hero," Midoriya said as he smiled at his new elder brother. Shinso smirked back as he grabbed Midoriya's hand. "Well then, you won't be disappointed." The two fathers in the room smiled at their exchange and was staring at them fondly. "Let my new mission begin," Midoriya thought in the moment. It's been a week since Midoriya had joined the family. He wanted to keep his family name, like Shinso and his new fathers allowed it. They also showed him to his room, which was now filled up with all his stuff that he had brought. Devices he had built over the years and a huge pile of notebooks were in the room, which looked like hacker ready for business. The bed was opposite to his desk and the notebooks were on the shelves, but there wasn't enough room, so some were on the floor. The desk had 3 large computer screens, which one was on top of the 2, but the point was that it took up all the space of the desk. Once seeing Midoriya's room and how much stuff was in there, they all sweat dropped. It truly looked like he was some kind of hacker, which he was, and ready to do some illegal stuff. Over the week, Midoriya put Shinso through many things and left him in some dangerous situations to see if he had the hero of a hero. Luckily, he wasn't disappointed and decided to help him become a better hero. They trained early in the morning and late in the evening. On the weekdays, Shinso came to school even more tired than he was usually, which gave some of his friends, aka, the Deku squad, some worries. They tried to tell Aizawa, but their teacher didn't really care. As long as he knew why he was tired, then it should be fine. But after seeing the training Midoriya had given Shinso, even he thought it was brutal. The whole Aizawa family watched him train in the morning and night and thought looks can be deceiving. After spending time with his new family, the vigilante decided that it was time to start his assignment. It was a Friday night and everyone was at home. Aizawa, Hisashi, and Shinso-kun. I'm going to start the investigation now, so you might not see me as much, announced Midoriya as he was walking towards them in the kitchen. Are you sure? Aizawa asked. Midoriya nodded with a smile. Yes. I feel comfortable with this family and I trust you. This might help you and stop many civilians from being hurt. The lesser the villains, the more the people are safe. They all smiled. Shinso questioned, what about my training? I already wrote down what you need to do and after you feel like the training is getting easy, then I think Aizawa would be more than glad to teach you some of his moves. Midoriya replied. Shinso's sweat dropped. He knew what Midoriya's training was and to think that it was easy he wouldn't be able to complete it so soon. Anyway, I'm going to be in my room a lot and out and about. Are you going to eat with us? The blonde of the family asked. I'm sorry Hisashi, but I might not. I can try, but it's more likely that I don't. The faster I find the answer, the faster I know if I have to keep the danger down. Midoriya said as he started to head towards his room. The hobo sighed. Fine, but make sure that you take care of yourself, problem child. Yes sir. Midoriya shouted in a teasing tone as his hand went up to his forehead. The boy ran up the stairs and grabbed his vigilante costume. He changed into it and placed his mask on his face. The door opened once he was finished changing and it revealed his elder brother. So that's your vigilante costume? The masked vigilante nodded. Yep, you like. Emichim. It looks nice. I can tell how people don't really see you in the dark. Shinso responded. It's supposed to. I didn't want villains nor heroes to catch me and do whatever, I wanted to be out and about saving people. Midoriya said in a voice changer, which made him sound a bit older. Anyway, I better get going. See you later Shinso-kun. It has been 2 weeks since Midoriya decided to start his little mission, but he only found small clues. It didn't really help him, but he kept them, since it might open up the bigger picture. He rarely went home and went back on the run from villains. Luckily they never caught him and made sure that they didn't know where his family was. One night, Hikari was trying to gather more information by spreading his area. He was hiding in the shadows and heard 2 whispering voices. Young MSTR, we are ready to attack once we reach back to the base. Finally. Do you know how long I have waited for this? Hikari moved closer, but made sure that he wasn't spotted. Yes, young MSTR, and it's all ready. The secret weapon is also ready. All Might's supposed to be there, right? Indeed. Once we get there we can kill him with the weapon. Hikari frowned at the word kill. When that word was mentioned, nothing good came out of it. He was ready to hear their plan and report it to Nizu or deal with them himself. Great. Once we're there, we might even get to kill some of those UA brats. Kurogiri, let's go. Of course Shigaraki. We shall attack in the morning. Hikari's eyes widened. He had to report Nizu or catch them now. He decided to try and catch them now, but once he headed their direction, they weren't there, DMN it. Not good. I have to get back or else Shinso-kun and many others might get hurt. He thought. Hikari ran as fast as he could from roof to roof, but the sun was rising and he might not even make it there in time. Once Hikari reached UA, the sun had been up for hours and he had to be careful about not being spotted. He had dashed to the school and secretly broke into the school, but it was okay, since he normally did this to give Nizu reports. The vigilante quickly, but quietly went to Nizu's room. He had a sigh of relief once he saw the rat Satan was in his office. Nizu, emergency. He whispered. Nizu turned around to face the vigilante quickly. What's going on? Bad news. Is there anywhere that the students will be going to with all might? Nizu frowned. How do you know that? Hikari explained, I heard two guys talking about it when I was gathering information. Names were Kurogiri and Shigaraki. They are planning to attack somewhere filled with UA students. Also planning trying to kill All Might with a secret weapon and they seemed pretty confident about it. They mentioned killing some students as well. Nizu paled. Not good. We already sent 1A to the USJ. The USJ. Nizu nodded as he went over to the mic. He switched it on. All teachers to my office. Classes are cancelled for today. Once he finished his announcement, Hikari was ready to hop out of the window. Nizu turned his head to the vigilante. Where are you going? He asked. I'm going to save my father and brother. He answered as he jumped out the window. Once rushed towards the window and saw nothing. He sighed and teachers started to fill the room. Nizu made a quick explanation, but the message was clear. Students were in danger. They quickly got onto a bus and head to the USJ as fast as they could. Meanwhile, Hikari was running as fast as he could. He didn't have time to waste. He had to make it on time to save his father and brother, but also his childhood friend. He had learnt that Bakugo had successfully entered UA, but learnt that he had a bit of an anger issue. Though it didn't change his opinion on him, since he was the one who told him to continue his dream, even if he never did really follow it. As long as he kept running and made it in time to save people, he didn't care if he was tired or dead. As long as he had the strength and energy to keep moving, then he would have the strength and energy to save people. The only wish he had was to make it on time. At the USJ, the Class 1A had just arrived. They had just gone off the bus and headed to the entrance of the dome. They were greeted by the Pro Hero 13 and had to listen to her introduction as they walked into the building. The hero was explained the exercise they were about to do, but then a purple mist started to cover the center of the building. This was unnoticed by everyone, but a spiky red head. Cool, you have fake villains as well. He exclaimed. Fake villains. Repeated the heroes. Aizawa turned towards the direction his student was facing. His eyes widened at the sight of seeing multiple figures exiting the mist. He readied his position and yelled out orders. Those aren't fake, they're real. 13, stay and protect the students. He ordered as he raced to the multiple figures still exiting the eerie mist. Students were panicking. They were shaking and frozen. Some of them were ready to fight and back up their teacher, but as he ordered, 13 made sure the students were in front of her and she made sure that she would be able to protect them. As the students stood near the entrance and watched their teacher fight, but the purple mist was right behind them. It lifted 13's guard up and she made sure that every student had theirs up too. The mist formed into a figure. It neither had a solid body nor head. It was only a human body in shape. Hello, I am Kurogiri and I have come with the League of Villains, whose goal is to collect All Might's head. The purple mist announced. But it appears that he isn't here, so the young MSTR has decided to kill some of you off. Students paled at the threat. To kill the symbol of peace and themselves, the situation had gone to worse to even worse. The light-hearted students started to shake, but as to the students who were ready to fight, 2 of them rushed towards the mist. They ran in with their attacks activated, which was a hard punch and a bunch of explosions. 13 cried out to them to stop, but it was too late. Kurogiri used his quirk to send most of the students to different zones of the USJ. It left some students with the pro-hero, but they were all separated. The students fought alongside with 13 to take down the villain who was blocking their way to freedom. As the students and heroes fought, a certain vigilante was nearly there at the destination. Huffing and puffing, the vigilante was racing towards the huge dome, which he knew was the USJ. He had once eavesdropped on Aizawa as he was explaining where he would be for a field trip to Hizashi. That was a week ago, when it was late at night and came into his room for a rest. He described the dome to be a huge white semicircle, and the one Midoriya saw in sight, looked exactly as he described. He rushed to the entrance and tried to push open the door while breathing, but it wasn't working. Something was blocking it. Instead, as a countermeasure, he looked up and saw windows at the very top of the dome. He stared at it and sighed, knowing what he had to do. He ran to the tallest tree, which was surrounding the USJ, and climbed it. Once he reached to the very top, he was about the same height as the window. Luckily for him, the branch he was on was long and thought he could break into the USJ. He took a breath and braced himself for what was about to happen. He started to run across the branch, and once he was at the very end of it, he leaped into the air. He pushed himself forward and crashed against the window. Once he was inside the USJ, he started to fall. As he fell, he thought, "CRP, I forgot about the landing." As he continued to fall, he was panicking and trying to find a plan he could use, but when he finally landed, he was in the water zone. He hit the water and saw many villains. They had their eyes widened once they saw him, but Hikari didn't let them have the time to react. He swam up to the surface and made his way onto a ship. When Hikari was on the ship, he let out a sigh of relief, but as he looked up, he saw 2 unfamiliar students and Shinso. They were all on guard, except for Shinso once he realized who it was, but the other 2 seemed to have different reactions. The girl had her tongue sticking out and was ready to attack, while the mini boy was shaking all over. "What are you doing here?" asked Shinso. Hikari's voice sounded older, but he answered, "I overheard that some villains were going to attack here and came. I came to help, and also some pro-heroes are coming for backup, so we need to hold on until they get here." Shinso nodded, ready to listen to his younger brother's instructions, but the others weren't. Mineta spoke up. "Shinso, how do we know we can trust this person?" "Because he is Shinso started, but Hikari interrupted. "It doesn't matter who I am if I'm going to help. We can discuss that later, but I promise that Eraserhead knows who I am, and so will the backup heroes." Azui dropped her guard of the vigilante. "Karo, fine, but once this is over, we will really see if you're on our side." "Karo, that's fine, but now you should regroup with your class, which are near the entrance," Hikari said as he was readying himself to once more go running around the place looking for people. Azui and Mineta nodded, and Shinso was just going to speak. He asked a question to the villains below, and they all answered, since they're stupid. His order once he got them all under his control was to tie themselves up and get out of the water. The teens hopped off the ship and made their way back to shore. Once touching the ground, Azui and Mineta dashed towards the entrance to regroup with their fellow peers, as Shinso stayed behind to have a word with the vigilante. "Midoriya, what are they planning?" "Shinso-kun, remember to call me Hikari. I'm in my costume." "Right, sorry, but what are they planning?" Shinso repeated the question, then faced the vigilante with a serious expression. He had his brows frowned and eyes filled with determination. Hikari gave a sigh. "They're planning to kill All Might and at the same time, try and kill some students. Also, it seems they have a secret weapon to do so," he explained. So what he said was true. Shinso whispered as his arms crossed. Pardon. Shinso said, the purple mist named Kurogiri said that they were going to kill All Might and us, but he never mentioned a secret weapon. That's the point of it being a secret. So no one knows about it. Hikari replied. I guess. Shinso responded. Shinso-kun, we have wasted enough time. You should head back and help your class. I will let your classmates know what's going on and help Aizawa after. Okay, but stay safe, Midoriya. Shinso said as he started to run to the entrance of the USJ. Hikari. Name is Hikari. Midoriya yelled as Shinso's back was turned towards him. Right. He shouted back. The masked vigilante sighed, but it wasn't for long. He had a new mission. To gather all the students at the entrance and help Aizawa get out of this mess. He charged towards different zones instructing the students to regroup at the entrance, but it was sort of a hassle. He had to explain what was going on to them all over again. Even though it was good that they were cautious, it was annoying to repeat what he says to every group. At the USJ, the Class 1A had just arrived. They had just gone off the bus and headed to the entrance of the dome. They were greeted by the Pro Hero 13 and had to listen to her introduction as they walked into the building. The hero was explained the exercise they were about to do, but then a purple mist started to cover the center of the building. This was unnoticed by everyone, but a spiky red head. Cool, you have fake villains as well. He exclaimed. Fake villains. Repeated the heroes. Aizawa turned towards the direction his student was facing. His eyes widened at the sight of seeing multiple figures exiting the mist. He readied his position and yelled out orders. Those aren't fake, they're real. 13, stay and protect the students. He ordered as he raced to the multiple figures still exiting the eerie mist. Students were panicking. They were shaking and frozen. Some of them were ready to fight and back up their teacher, but as he ordered, 13 made sure the students were in front of her and she made sure that she would be able to protect them. As the students stood near the entrance and watched their teacher fight, but the purple mist was right behind them. It lifted 13's guard up and she made sure that every student had theirs up too. The mist formed into a figure. It neither had a solid body nor head. It was only a human body in shape. Hello, I am Kurogiri and I have come with the League of Villains, whose goal is to collect All Might's head. The purple mist announced. But it appears that he isn't here, so the young MSTR has decided to kill some of you off. Students paled at the threat. To kill the symbol of peace and themselves, the situation had gone to worse to even worse. The light-hearted students started to shake, but as to the students who were ready to fight, 2 of them rushed towards the mist. They ran in with their attacks activated, which was a hard punch and a bunch of explosions. 13 cried out to them to stop, but it was too late. Kurogiri used his quirk to send most of the students to different zones of the USJ. It left some students with the Pro Hero, but they were all separated. The students fought alongside with 13 to take down the villain who was blocking their way to freedom. As the students and heroes fought, a certain vigilante was nearly there at the destination. Huffing and puffing, the vigilante was racing towards the huge dome, which he knew was the USJ. He had once eavesdropped on Aizawa as he was explaining where he would be for a field trip to Hizashi. That was a week ago, when it was late at night and came into his room for a rest. He described the dome to be a huge white semicircle and the one Midoriya saw in sight, looked exactly as he described. He rushed to the entrance and tried to push open the door while breathing, but it wasn't working. Something was blocking it. Instead, as a countermeasure, he looked up and saw windows at the very top of the dome. He stared at it and sighed, knowing what he had to do. He ran to the tallest tree, which was surrounding the USJ, and climbed it. Once he reached to the very top, he was about the same height as the window. Luckily for him, the branch he was on was long and thought he could break into the USJ. He took a breath and braced himself for what was about to happen. He started to run across the branch and once he was at the very end of it, he leaped into the air. He pushed himself forward and crashed against the window. Once he was inside the USJ, he started to fall. As he fell he thought, CRP, I forgot about the landing. As he continued to fall, he was panicking and trying to find a plan he could use, but when he finally landed, he was in the water zone. He hit the water and saw many villains. They had their eyes widened once they saw him, but Hikari didn't let them have the time to react. He swam up to the surface and made his way onto a ship. 3 days after the incident at the USJ, the vigilante had just woken up and was in an empty hospital room. He looked around and saw his costume on his right. He scanned his surroundings and heard a few voices at the door. He closed his eyes pretending that he was going to be asleep and see who would be visiting him at the hospital. The door opened and all the green-haired teen could see was darkness. He heard voices and they were coming closer to him. When is he going to wake up? Asked a familiar voice. I say, maybe in a week or 2. Another voice answered. Isn't that too long? Another familiar voice exclaimed. Well, Midoriya thought it would be good for him to wake up now and interrupted the unfamiliar voice, which was the doctor's. I'm awake. Midoriya announced as he sat up. He scratched the back of his head and opened his eyes. There were 4 people in the room excluding himself. They were his brother, fathers, and the doctor. The doctor's expression was wide eyes open and staring at him in disbelief. Everyone in the room was looking at the teen and it was a bit awkward with the silence. Once the silence felt like it was long enough, the hospitalized teen looked at Aizawa. Yo Aizawa, you look like a mummy. Are you going to Egypt? Midoriya teased as he saw Aizawa covered in bandages. Aizawa grumbled. Ha. Ha. Very funny. The first thing you say to me after you wake up after 3 days is that. Yep. Replied the broccoli boy as he grinned at the pro-hero. Aizawa sighed. Why did I even worry about the kid? He muttered to himself as he walked out of the room with the doctor, with Hisashi following them. It left the problem child with Shinso. He walked closer to the bed and faced the kid. Really? You had to comment on the bandages? Asked Shinso. Midoriya grinned as he responded. Of course, if I didn't, how long were we going to be in the silence? Shinso shrugged. So, how do you feel? It hurts everywhere, but nothing I can't handle. After all, I am the vigilante Hikari and I have fought many villains. It's not the first time I've got serious injury. Of course it hurts. You were punched by the monster thing multiple times and I don't think it a good thing for you to get a lot of injures. Replied the hero student. Midoriya shook his head. I know, but if you're going to save lives, it's better for the hero to get injured than the victim. When you become a pro, you will understand. Don't make it sound like you're older than me. But I have done this many years than you. Whatever. 2 days after Midoriya woke up, he was allowed to leave the hospital with his family. They collected all their things and left the building, only to be greeted with the white chimera. He had a car right behind him and he had the smile of the devil. Ah, Midoriya. I have something to ask you. Exclaimed the bear dog rat thing. Please enter the car so we can talk. The broccoli sighed. What about Aizawa, Hisashi, and Shinso-kun? Well, they can come with us. The rat Satan answered. Okay. They all entered the car and it seemed that Midnight was going to drive with Hisashi in the front with her and the rest at the back. Shinso was near the door on the right, looking outside the window, as Midoriya sat in the middle. Nizu sat on Aizawa's lap and faced the vigilante. Midoriya, I have another request for you. He stated. The teen raised a brow. Oh. What might it be? Don't I still have to do the investigation on the LOV? I do still ask you to look into the LOV, but there is another thing that concerns me. Nizu responded. What is your concern, Nizu? Questioned the vigilante. Nizu answered, I do think you remember the little conversation you heard in the alleyway. Yeah, what about it? You said that they wanted to kill All Might and some of the students. I don't want some of my students getting killed, so this request is for you to protect and guard them. Nizu said. Shinso, who was listening in on the conversation, had eyes widened, but continued to look out the window. Aizawa and the rest of the pro-heroes in the vehicle thought that Nizu might want to ask that of him. After all, he was a good fighter, who could stand up to a pro-hero level and defeat multiple villains. Midoriya sighed. So you're asking me to investigate the LOV and protect Class 1A, is that it? Yes. Nizu replied. Nizu, why can't you get other pro-heroes to protect your students, like get more teachers and staff in UA? We can't. It will cause suspicion for the civilians, villains and students. Nizu explained. I want my school to be a safe place where the students don't have to worry. I would get the staff to guard the students, but there are other classes still going and they need their education. That's why I ask you to do it. I know that it's going to overwork, but you can just work in the shadows and help us. Maybe even go undercover in UA as a student. You can investigate the LOV at night and you can sleep during when the class is having their normal subjects. Midoriya thought it over. It would be like having to protect heroes that I don't know will become real ones. But if I do this, I can save lives and maybe take down the LOV, along with I won't be bored. Fine, answered Midoriya, I'll do it, but not undercover. I don't want to be there and I rather stay in the shadows. Too bad. Thought the others in the car. Then it's a deal. Exclaimed Nizu as they all reached their destination, which was the late gates of UA. It was a normal school, yet the hallways were empty. The students were given a break for a week due to the attack. Midoriya stared at the gate and thought to himself. Great. Now I have to babysit. The kids are back in school and the halls in UA were filled. They were flooding with students and the sounds in the hall were chatter and footsteps. There were some laughter and cheering of students meeting up with friends and classmates. In the classroom of 1A, the students were up and about talking to one another. They were the same, as if the attack never happened and were cheerful, which Aizawa, who was hiding under the desk in his sleeping bag, found annoying. Once the bell had gone, he immediately stood up and told them to shut up. The teens went back to their seats and listened to the classes. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Midoriya was in his vigilante suit and was watching the students from afar in a tree. It was part of his mission and he had no choice. It was kind of boring, since all he ever did was watch. So, after some time he brought his laptop with him when he guarded 1A and hacked into multiple sites. He was still tracking the LOV, but couldn't find anything so far. He kept trying and once he got bored of it, he would hack into the police database and look through files. They mentioned some new villains and they were just rookies. The green-haired teen decided to help and track them down. You never know, they might be connected to the LOV in a way. At night, Hikari went out to play and patrolled his area. He found some villains that the police were looking for, so he beat them up and dropped them in front of the police station. There would be people coming in and out of the station, so he didn't want himself to be seen. What he did was to jump onto the building and stood on the roof. After that, he dropped the unconscious villain in the front and the police would see the villain right at their doorstep. Literally. The building was only one story, so the villains didn't have a hard fall. It had been a few months of capturing villains at night and watching/guarding the students by day. The sports festival had already gone as planned without any problems, same as canon, and the students did their internships. Stain was captured earlier by Hikari in his early years, so the Ida event of trying to murder him never happened. Nor did his brother get hurt. Hikari spent that time investigating the LOV and any other abnormal attacks during that time. One night, Hikari was on the patrol but heard something in an alleyway. It was always the alleyway. He hopped onto a roof and listened to the chatter below. Remember, the LOV has a plan. A person said, how do we know we can trust them? A female voice replied. Just stick to the plan. Dobby burn the forest and get the kids separated. After take the Bakugo kid. The first voice answered. That's a good plan. No it isn't. Exclaimed a voice. A male voice sighed. Whatever, as long as we capture the Bakugo kid, everything will be fine. On the rooftop, where a certain person was listening in, he was shocked to hear the news. Sure, his childhood friend had changed a lot, but come on. Why did they need to kidnap him? Hikari was going to try and capture them, but he had spent too much time on trying to figure out why they needed Bakugo, that they already left. He sighed and saw that the sun would be bring daybreak soon, so it was time to head back. In the afternoon, the school had their lunch break, so it would be a good time to see the rat Satan and talk to him about what he overheard again. He jumped into the open window, which Nizu left open for some reason, and stood in front of the desk. The chimera had his head down, was looked at pieces of paper, which the teen thought were documents. He didn't want the chimera to stop his work, so he stood silently in the shadows until he thought that the chimera finished his work. After a few minutes, Nizu had looked up from his desk to grab a cup of tea. Hikari thought it would be better to tell him now, since he had to go back to watching 1A, so he spoke up, scaring the rat dog bear thing. Nizu. The voice called out. The chimera jumped in his chair and looked towards the shadow where Hikari hid. Hikari. How long have you been there? He asked. About 10 minutes. He answered. Why are you here? How come you never told me about your presence? Questioned the principal. I didn't want you to be distracted from your work, so I waited for you to finish, and I have something I want to talk about. Replied the teen. Nizu frowned. Whatever the vigilante had to talk about without asking him into the principal's office, was always bad news. Please, continue. Well, you see. Last night I was patrolling the area as normal and I overheard voices in the alleyway. Hikari explained. I got suspicious and went onto a roof to eavesdrop, and I heard something rather disturbing. They were talking about the LOV and something to do with burning a forest, but that wasn't the most disturbing bit. They are planning to kidnap a person in 1A. Oh, that's not good. Nizu stated. Did you happen to catch the name of the student? Hikari nodded. Katsuki Bakugo. It seems we have to be extra careful about it then. Nizu commented. Hikari, I want you to protect and keep an eye on Bakugo. I have a feeling that they want him for their plans and that they will try and take him in their summer training camp. They might attack when they are tired from their training, so they won't be able to protect themselves. Hikari sighed. More work for me. Summer camp is in 2 weeks' time. Hikari, please look after the students. Nizu pleaded. Hikari nodded. I have to look after my brother and father after all. Thank you. Nizu thanked as Hikari heard the bell ring and headed out of the room, back to his tree where he watched from afar. My job just gets harder, huh? Thought the vigilante as he continued to hack into websites. It has been 2 weeks since the green-haired teen had talked to the rat Satan. He had used that time to prepare for the battle ahead and did his daily missions. So far he hadn't found anything on the LOV, except the fact that they recruited some new members and they would be the ones attacking in the summer camp. Gathering information on the new recruits was a bit hard for the vigilante. It seemed that they were in the shadows and this would be the first time for them to appear into the spotlight. He sighed at the information he got and had given it to the principal of UA. He didn't really do anything about it and just told Aizawa about the attack. The Chimera didn't want to ruin and interrupt the summer holidays of his staff, which would be spent on thinking and setting up lessons for the new term. Aizawa and Midoriya discussed multiple strategies on the upcoming attack, but they didn't know how to keep all the students calm in the situation. Most of the pro-heroes thought that only the rookies would be attacking the camp, so 5 pro-heroes should be enough for the situation, but Hikari knew to never underestimate an opponent. It was time to get onto the bus and head over to the camp. Hikari was in his costume and had his mask tied on. He had crept into Nizu's office to speak with the principal. All the preparations were complete and the wild PP cats knew what was expected to come. The rat dog bear thing had also given the vigilante permission to appear in front of the class, which the teen thought it was good. He hoped to help the future heroes to train and push past their past or hardships. He had a lot to talk to some students about. He may even help his brother in his training. The masked teen was out of the office just in time for the bus to leave. He hopped into the bus without anyone noticing and saw Aizawa. Of course the teacher had sensed him and signaled him to come and hide in his sleeping bag, which was empty and the students thought his was using it as a blanket. Once reaching their destination, which was a cliff, the students walked off the bus for a stretch. Hikari also walked off, but immediately hid in the shadows. He heard the chattering and the introductions of the class and the pro-heroes. After the introduction, it seemed that a student was paying attention to the tone the heroes were using and yelled to their peers to get back to the bus. But it was too late. The cliff came sliding down with the students in tow. "You have to get back to camp before nightfall or no dinner for you," shouted Mandalay as the pro-heroes looked over the cliff to see the students looking at them with an "Are you serious?" look. "You will have to battle earth monsters while you try and get there. Good luck." There were groans from below and Hikari decided to come out of the shadows. He slowly made his way to the heroes and spoke up. "Do I follow them?" he asked, which surprised the wild PP cats, since they didn't know he was there. "Hey, you should be down there with your classmates," stated Tiger. Aizawa sighed. "No, he isn't in my class, but he still has to follow them. Meet the infamous Vigilante, which Nizu formed an alliance with, Hikari." "What?" the other pro-heroes shouted. "Hikari." "Yes, that's me," Hikari confirmed. "Aizawa, is there any certain students you want me to follow? If not, then I plan to reveal myself to a couple of students, which Nizu gave me permission to, and I want to help them push past stuff. I don't care, but keep an eye on Bakugo, since the LOV are after him." Aizawa replied in a tired tone. "Okay then," Hikari said. He faced the pro-heroes who were out of their shocked state and had towards the cliff. "It was nice to meet you wild PP cats, but it seems that I have another job to do. If you excuse me, and it would be lovely to talk to you again later." Before the heroes had a chance to say anything, the teen jumped down from the cliff and landed in a tree on one of its branches. The wild PP cats quickly looked down at the cliff searching for the vigilante, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen. "Now I know why he's good at his job. I don't even sense him," whispered Mandalay. Ragdoll asked, "Is it really all right to let him look after your student's Eraserhead? Are you even sure he's okay?" Aizawa sighed as he walked back to the bus. "He's fine. After all, he has been for the 8 years that I tried to capture him. He will watch from afar and help some students. He is hard to find, that's why Nizu asked him requests and no one can sense him. They can only when he allows them to." "He's that good?" Pixie Bob questioned. Aizawa nodded and he disappeared into the bus. The wild PP cats only looked to one another and followed after him, heading back to camp. Hikari was silently jumping from tree to tree while trailing the class. He would look down and watch as they fought the earth monsters, which was kind of stupid. In his opinion, they shouldn't be using so much energy and do what he was doing. Making his way to camp without any unnecessary fights. He heard the sounds of quirks being activated and the battle cry of the students. It was getting pretty noisy and boring, so he thought it would be time to meet some of the students, which he thought were interesting. First on his list was Shoto Todoroki. Todoroki was running while breathing and was threw ice at every monster he was faced with. He was really careless with how he used his quirk, which always made the vigilante mentally sigh. He had a great quirk, yet he only used half of it. Hikari continued to trail him and saw that he was slowing down. He was breathing and was setting himself onto the floor and looked like he was taking a break. The broccoli decided it would be a good time for him to step in and talk. He was in the tree that Todoroki was leaning against. Hikari sat on the branch and laid back only for him to face Todoroki upside down with his mask on. Yo! Todoroki's eyes widened and was on guard. He placed his right hand in front of him ready to activate his ice when needed. Whoa, calm down Todoroki-kun. Midoriya said as he placed his hands in front of him, showing that he wasn't planning to attack. Seeing that his hands were in front and had nothing in them, Todoroki dropped his hand, but still had his guard up. Who are you? And how do you know my name? He asked. Midoriya grinned under the mask and said in a teasing tone. That's for me to know and you to find out. Todoroki frowned. Are you a villain? Nope. Hikari answered. But that's what a villain would say. Todoroki stated. Hikari questioned. What you expecting? Oh hi, I'm a villain. Try and catch me. Really? Todoroki was silent. Of course a villain would say they weren't a villain, but if he was telling the truth, which he is, then he would be attacking someone innocent. Just like his father. Todoroki didn't like that thought, so he decided to not attack the newcomer, but if he tried anything funny, he would be ready to attack. Okay, let's say you're not a villain, why are you here? Todoroki asked as he tried to study the character in front of him. Hikari giggled. I'm here to help. Todoroki's brow raised. Help. Yep. Help. Exclaimed the boy hanging from the tree. What do I need help with? Your quirk. The vigilante answered with a serious tone. Todoroki frowned. What's wrong with my quirk? I'm using it fine and I can attack with it. Hikari sighed and jumped out of the tree, landing in front of Todoroki and sat on the floor with him. Todoroki backed up and watched the figure as he sat in front of him. He was shocked at the sudden movement and was about to attack him, but when he saw that the vigilante was just sitting in front of him, he stopped his attack. Your quirk. You're only using half. Hikari said in a serious tone. That's the problem. If you used it to the max, you could save many people that you can't with your ice. I ask, why do you not use your fire? Todoroki felt his blood boil. He hated his fire, or even worse despises it. He swore to himself to never use it and never let that flaming trash can of his father win. None of your business. He shouted. Hikari frowned. It is. If I'm going to protect this class, I need to know what all of you are capable of. So far I know what every else is capable of, but you. I don't know. You have been holding back and just like in the sports festival, you will lose because you never give it 100%. Hikari explained. Now, tell me why. Todoroki froze. Protect this class. Hikari sighed. Yes, but that's not the point. Please tell me. I will lend an ear and the saying is, once you talk it out, it lifts up the weight in your chest. Todoroki-kun, why do you refuse to accept your fire? Todoroki wondered. Should I tell him? It's not like he can do anything with it. Todoroki sighed and looked Midoriya in the eyes. Well, where he thought his eyes were, he asked in a serious voice. Have you ever heard of a quirk marriage? Hikari clenched his fist. Yes, I do. I'm guessing that you are a product of it, Todoroki-kun. I heard that you have many siblings. I'm also guessing that whoever wanted the quirk marriage thought of them as failures. Am I correct? Todoroki's eyes widened. A person he didn't even know already knew about his siblings and the fact of what a quirk marriage was. How did you? Let's say, I've been investigating you for some time now, Todoroki-kun. The vigilante answered. It was true. Ever since he started to vigilante business, he not only looked into villains, but also heroes. It made him decide to help them rise or make them fall. He made many heroes fall in the shadows, but when he tried to look into endeavor, he saw the quirk marriage. It was 5 years ago. Their eldest son was dead and the only siblings were still in school. Their mother, in a mental hospital, so he didn't know if he needed to take Endeavor down. If he did, then how would the income go to them? It would be a long time for their mother to find work and the children were in school, so they couldn't help. If only the eldest was still alive. He could have worked to support his family, while their father was in jail. Todoroki asked, "Why?" "I'm sorry, Todoroki-kun. I already knew your family's situation, yet didn't help," Hikari said. He explained that he found about his life after the death of his older brother, but didn't mention that he was a vigilante. "But after all that, I guess I do understand why you don't use your fire, but I want to hear your side of the twisted story." The explanation made Todoroki blink multiple times. He sighed and scratched the back of his head. "I guess I understand. But I'll tell you this. I don't use my fire because I don't want to be like him nor use his power. That was the oath I swore." Hikari gave a heavy sigh as he was getting up and dusting himself. Todoroki watched him waiting for a reply. "Well, that's stupid." "What?" Todoroki questioned as he felt that his oath was getting mocked at. "It's stupid," repeated the vigilante as he stared down at the sitting dual-hair-colored teen. "Let me ask you this. Is your ice your mother's?" "No." Todoroki answered. "Then how is your flame your father's? Your quirk and his are completely different." Hikari explained. "Sure, you both have a fire element, but you also have ice. It's your quirk and your quirk alone. It's how the user uses it. If you don't want to be like your father, you just have to save and protect people with your flame. It's your power, Todoroki-kun." Todoroki's eyes widened. He had forgotten that it was his quirk. He was always the masterpiece of the family and his father never saw him for who he was. He only thought about his quirk. A tear fell down his left eye. The vigilante smiled softly under the mask and was getting ready to jump away, but before that, he helped Todoroki off the floor. Todoroki wiped his tear and thanked the vigilante. "Thank you." "No problem, but remember to get stronger and protect the people. Become a hero of the heart and train. Many people would kill themselves just to get another or get a quirk like yours, so please do try your best," Hikari said as he hopped into a tree. "Okay," Todoroki replied. "Well, I better go now and you should hurry and get to camp. Just be careful to not burn the forest down," Hikari yelled as he ran off. Todoroki shouted, "Wait. I didn't get your name. I want to talk to you later." "How do I call you?" "Just whisper V and I'll come if I have the time. Also about my name, that's for me to know and you to find out," the vigilante shouted back as he disappeared from view. Todoroki sighed and shook his head. He looked ahead with new determination in his eyes and went back to heading to the campsite. Once arriving at the campsite, it was evening and the students were laying on the ground, breathing, trying to catch their breath. Hikari was up in a tree, mentally sighing at how the class used up all their energy. He continued to watch the students. He had noticed some of the non-fighter user quirks. He tried to avoid the monsters, but they ended up trying to fight them, or running away from them, while the monsters trailed behind them. The heroes had called all the students together and gave them instructions and an explanation on what was going to happen in the week. They all groaned when they heard that they would have to make their own meals from tomorrow. Onwards. After the little explanation, the heroes ate at the dining table, which was outside of the building, and had a cover, covering the table and benches. The vigilante sat in a tree as he watched the people eat their dinner down below. He smiled softly under his mask as he watched all the chatter beneath him. He made sure that his father knew he was there. Izuku would glance into the tree every once in a while, luckily no one noticed this. After dinner, the heroes headed inside the building and Hikari was left outside. He watched as the door closed behind them and took off his mask. It was refreshing for him to take off his, after wearing it for the whole day. He laid back onto a tree and placed one of his foot on the branch he was sitting on and the other was hanging down. He closed his eyes as the wind blew across his freckled face. When he reopened his eyes, he saw the lights turn on in the building. There was chatter also there and some yelling, which Midoriya giggled at. He stopped giggling after a few seconds and thought it would be best for him to patrol through the forest. The vigilante grabbed his mask and placed it back on his face. He got up from his seat and started to hop around in trees for his patrol, to see if there was any signs of an attack. There was nothing out of the ordinary. All the team could see was trees, bushes and trees. The vigilante headed back to the building and he sat on top of the roof. He took off his mask and looked up towards the night sky. It was filled with shining lights in the sky. They were blinking and staring down towards the ground. Midoriya smiled fondly at the sky as he was laying down on through with his hands behind his head. He remembered a memory that he had long forgotten. It had been many years since he could just look up at the sky without a worry. The last time was with his mother and his childhood friend with his parents. They were camping and they had arrived at the camping site in the middle of the night. That night was the brightest night he had ever seen. The stars fell across the sky and they all stopped to look at the sight. Now looking back at the sky, the memory was like it was yesterday. Few tears ran down his cheek as he remembered how his mother died, but under the gazes of the stars, made his resolve stronger. After staring at the stars, he heard a whisper as the lights in the building were going out. A voice whispered at an open window. Midoriya smirked at the call, as he only told a certain someone to call him when he wanted to talk. He placed his mask back on and started to head toward the window quietly. The students were sharing rooms in two, so for meeting with the person, he had to make sure that he isn't caught by his roommate. "Hello Todoroki-kun." Midoriya greeted as he looked carefully through the window. It seemed that Todoroki was paired with Shinso. Shinso seemed to be asleep as Todoroki was making his way over to the window. "What do you need me for?" "Well, I want to talk to you and get to know you better, even if you're older than me." Maybe we can be friends," Todoroki stated. Midoriya paused and gave a little quiet giggle as he laid back against the wall. Todoroki's face went bright red at the thought of him being laughed at. "Oh, I see. I haven't had a friend after meeting Kaken, so sure." "Kaken?" Midoriya nodded. "Yeah, Kaken. He's my childhood friend since we were kids. You know, once I nearly gave up on being a hero." "Really?" asked Todoroki. "But, I guess you're a hero." "No," Midoriya replied. "I refuse to be a hero, but I do hope that future heroes, like yourself, will become better than others." "Why is that? And if you're not a hero nor villain, what are you?" "Me. I'm a person who saves lives and would give my life to save them. I want to be the light that guides lost ones through the darkness," Midoriya said as he looked up at the sky. Todoroki followed his gaze and looked up as well. He was breathtaken at the sight of the stars. "I wish to be a star that shines bright. To give people hope for the future." "But, what about you?" Todoroki looked back to the person outside the window. "I wish to save people with my power and to never let the fire burn out for the future to come." Midoriya grinned. "Good goal, even though you didn't like your father's side a few hours ago." Todoroki turned bright red and looked away. "That was before you opened my eyes." Midoriya giggled and faced towards the bed Shinso was laying in. "Yo, Shinso-kun. You don't have to pretend to be asleep." "What?" Todoroki questioned as he faced towards his roommate. Shinso sighed and got up from the bed, surprising Todoroki, since he didn't think his roommate was awake. Todoroki was also bright red. He didn't expect for his roommate to hear anything that was being said between him and the vigilante. "How did you know?" Shinso asked. Midoriya leaned against the window frame with his arms crossed. "You think I don't know when Aizawa is not sleeping? Don't you think that after running away from him for 8 years didn't help me with anything? Come on Shinso-kun, you are just like him," Midoriya explained. You both have a sleep dive, like coffee, have your own sleeping bag and the way you both are always tired. Todoroki muttered, secret love child. Midoriya heard and said teasingly. No more than that. They're father and son. Really? Todoroki exclaimed as he turned towards Shinso's direction. Shinso nodded, confirming that the vigilante was telling the truth. I should have known. Todoroki said to himself. Midoriya laughed and Shinso asked. When did you get here? I mean Hikari. I was here the whole time. The vigilante answered. I was on the bus with you and was trailing you until you reached camp. Wait. Hikari. Todoroki questioned. As in the infamous vigilante Hikari. Oh, right. I haven't told you, have I? Midoriya responded. Well hi, I'm Hikari. Pleasure to meet you properly. Shinso sighed. Todoroki, you know that this person is not in our class and you decide to be friendly with him without knowing his name. If this was another person, you properly shouldn't do that. Well, he helped me, so isn't he good? Midoriya shook his head. Even if someone helps you, you still need to be cautious, since not even person who helps you have a good intention. You're just lucky it's me. Todoroki nodded. I understand. It won't happen again. Good. Anyway, you two need to get some sleep. Aizawa won't go easy on you tomorrow even if you're his son Shinso-kun. He might even be harder. Midoriya said. Shinso groaned. I know. You should get some sleep too. I'll try. Midoriya replied. But, I have to patrol the area on more time. Why? Midoriya sighed as he pushed himself off the window frame. I have to protect this class, remember? Right, you told me that. Shinso responded. Midoriya smiled as he turned his back on them. Get some rest. I'll be on watch, so sleep. Have a good night Hikari. Todoroki said. Midoriya closed his eyes before jumping away. You too, my new friend. The broccoli was gone and left Todoroki's eyes widened. It was his first friend that he made on his own, without getting dragged by people. He smiled back as he looked up at the sky one last time before he went to bed. Shinso followed his steps and took a phone of the sky, which he was going to see to his brother later. Camp has only began, was Shinso's last thought before drifting into a deep slumber. The sun rose over the mountains and it was the break of dawn. The vigilante sat on top of the roof as he watched the sunrise with his mask on his face. He was awake the whole night and planned on sleeping in the afternoon when the class was up and about do things that Aizawa had in store for them. As he watched the sunrise, he heard sounds under him. It was the sounds of Aizawa waking up the lazy but students to start the day. After a few minutes, they were all outside and ready to start the day, though all of them looked sleepy. They formed a line as they were walking slowly and yawning with their eyes not fully open. Even though they were tired, Aizawa didn't care. He would always get woken up thanks to his idiot students, so it was payback time for him. Hikari watched from above as the hobo teacher gave instructions on what they would be doing for the camp. He sent them off to different places and the equipment was all set out, thanks to the help of the fox mask and the pro-heroes. It was the beginning of their Hell Week. Midoriya made his way to a high tree, where no one might see him and laid against the tree. He sat on a branch and closed his eyes. The night before was tiring. He patrolled the whole night, but found nothing. It was disappointing, but since the heroes were awake, he could finally get some sleep. With the light breeze and the warm sunshine hitting against his body, he made his way into a deep slumber. When the teen had woken up from his nap, it was noon and the students were having their lunch. The broccoli sighed as watched the class eat. He was planning to help out another person, but he didn't know who he should help next. He studied all the students and his eyes landed on a certain redhead. Kirishima, quirk hardening. He seemed friendly and also seemed to be a good friend. But there was one thing that the vigilante noticed. He wasn't really confident in his quirk. He seemed to compare it with quirks like Bakugo and Todoroki, which are flashy. Staring at the boy, the broccoli-haired teen decided who to meet next. Lunch was done and the heroes were going back to their stations. Hikari decided to trail the redhead and they were in front of a rock. It was 10 times bigger than the boys and it had multiple fist dents in it. Kirishima hardened his skin and started to punch the boulder. Behind the mask, Midoriya frowned at the sight of Kirishima yelling while trying to destroy the boulder. The redhead continued to try and the vigilante was in the tree just watching from afar and waited for his break. Kirishima seemed to be tired, as he was breathing and sweating while his quirk was deactivated. Midoriya grinned to himself as it was now the time for him to reveal himself. He hopped out of the tree and stood on top of the boulder. He sat down and let his legs dangle over the rock. "You're trying too hard," stated the vigilante as he placed his hands on the rock he was sitting on. "You should let the energy come to you without using it to yell out battle cries." Kirishima looked up and saw a figure on top of the rock. He went into a stance and questioned, "Who are you? Are you a villain? If so, why are you here?" Hikari sighed. "My name is for me to know and you to find out." "No, I'm not a villain and I'm here thanks to your principal and teacher. Also to help you," he explained. "How can I trust you?" Kirishima asked. Hikari shrugged. "Take it or leave it." The person below thought and dropped his stance. He looked up and looked careful at the appearance of the company he had. The person on the boulder had a black fox mask, so it was a bit suspicious, but it didn't look like he was going to attack. After all, he looked relaxed and there was nothing in his hands. "Fine, but what are you trying to help me with?" Hikari smirked. "Why, your flaw of course." "My flaw?" repeated the UA student. "Yes, your flaw. Do you even know what it is?" Kirishima paused and was silent. He was going through all of the mistakes he had made. Well, what mistakes he thought he made? Maybe because I can't do long distance and not strong enough?" Kirishima questioned. A tired sigh was heard from the vigilante. "No, that's not it. It's your confidence." "My confidence?" "Yes." Hikari answered. He hopped down from the boulder, which surprised the red teen. "You don't have confidence in your own quirk. Just like Yaoyorozu-san. You both lack the confidence. But I believe that Jiro-san helped her overcome that. You, Kirishima-kun, on the other hand, still haven't overcome that obstacle." "How is that a flaw?" exclaimed Kirishima. "You're doubting your own ability. Doing that, you limit yourself from doing your best," explained the vigilante. "From what I see, you are probably comparing your own quirk with others." "I am wrong." Kirishima shook his head. "My quirk isn't as flashy and cool as other quirks." "Is that your reason for doubting your abilities?" Hikari asked, and all he got in return was a slow nod, which was facing the ground. He muttered under his breath. "Another stupid reason." "What? Does it matter if your quirk is flashy?" asked the broccoli teen. Kirishima didn't respond as he continued. "Aizawa doesn't have a flashy quirk, yet he is a good hero." "Are you saying that Aizawa isn't a good hero?" "No. That's not what I meant," shouted the redhead as he looked back into the vigilante eyes. "Aizawa-sensei is a great hero. He protected us from the LOV and is teaching us how to become heroes. Yet he doesn't have a flashy quirk," Hikari added. The UA student was silent. "You have many classmates which don't have a flashy quirk, but I do believe that they will become great heroes in the future. Along with yourself. A hero isn't about one's quirk nor fame. It's about wanting to save people and the ability to do it. Keeping doubting yourself, then you might not have the ability and risk civilians' life. Have some confidence. You entered UA." Kirishima looked happy to hear those words, but something was still bothering him. "But, there are many people who can do the things I can. They don't need me. Another frustrated escaped the vigilante's lips. Can people harden their skin like you? Do they have the same willpower as you? No. There isn't a person who has someone like them. Everyone is different. People won't have the ways you cheer for your peers, and your quirk would be helpful when you're trying to break something and trying to be a shield. If you're thinking of the Class B student who can cover himself in iron, then you can go through fire without getting melted. Do you get it? Kirishima's eyes widened. He fully understood no. He was the only one of himself and no one can take his place in the world. He smiled and activated his quirk. He took a breath and walked towards the boulder. He was calm and closed his eyes. Hikari watched on the sidelines as Kirishima reopened his eyes and punched the boulder. The rock started to make a sound as a crack was going up to the top. After a few seconds the boulder was destroyed in half. The shark teeth boy cheered as a smile was forming underneath a mask. See? You could do it. The broccoli boy stated. Yes. Thanks bro. Kirishima looked towards him and gave a grin. The green-haired teen shook his head and started to walk towards a nearby tree. Where are you going? I have completed what I wanted to do. I have to go somewhere else. Replied the vigilante as he was now on top of a tree branch. What happens if I want to talk to you again? Asked the redhead. Hikari looked back and responded, ask. Shinso-kun or Todoroki-kun. They might tell you. Okay, thanks bro, exclaimed the UA student as he waved to the vigilante. The boy in the trees sighed as he was now dashing back to the building. The sun was setting and it was nearly time for him to do his patrol. These students really need to have caution. It was the last day of the camp, so it was either the villains are going to attack today, or they don't attack at all. There was the possibility that they forget the dates and attack while they were heading back to the school, but they were villains. They couldn't have do that unless they're idiots. Hikari was in his usual tree. He stared at the class as they were training their quirk once more. He had only helped Kirishima and Todoroki, but he felt satisfied with that. Once they fixed their problems completely, the class would have two more powerful peers, even if they were strong right at that moment. Other students have problems, but the vigilante believes that they would help each other with their problems. Though he couldn't help but want to help his childhood friend, Bakugo. He was afraid that he might let something slip and reveal himself. He couldn't let that happen, so he could only hope that others will help him. It was the same routine for the green-haired teen. He sat in the tree hole looking down below, or went to do his patrols silently, so the heroes wouldn't know he was moving about. The students were training their quirks as they were doing the instructions Aizawa told them to do. It was getting dark and the students had just finished their dinner. They were all tired and were lazing about, but Aizawa decided to call them all outside in the dark. It had been hours since the training for the week ended, but Aizawa had his ESHT grin plastered on his face. Knowing his own father's grin, Shinso backed away, but was caught by the hobo teacher. Where do you think you're going? He asked while dragging Shinso back with his scarf. The rest of the students stared at Shinso, as he was being pulled towards their teacher. Shinso sighed in defeat and gave up on trying to break free. Once he reached the teacher, he looked up to a glaring face and said while sweating, nowhere. Good. Aizawa stated as he released the violet-haired boy. Since today is the last day of the camp, I have set up a game. At the mention of the word game, the class was cheering and was discussing what the game might be about. Meanwhile, Hikari was in the tree right above the group and sighed. Before he had seen Aizawa walk around the forest with the other pro-heroes after dinner. They had laid down and left things on the ground. They even hid them. Aizawa glared and the class stopped its chatter. As I was saying. Your task is to find a coin. It is in the forest, but it is hidden in a radius of 20 meters around the building. Whoever finds the coins will win. Mina raised her hand as all the eyes were all on her. What do we get if you win? Aizawa smirked. You don't have to do homework for a month. The class cheered. Mina even shouted out that it would be fun, but Aizawa hadn't finished explaining. He continued. If you lose, you will have to do the triple amount of homework. As that statement, everyone's sweat dropped. They was whining and complaints, but they were the ones asking for it. They wanted a prize, so there should be a punishment. The teacher once again glared at them to shut them up. You have 2 hours to find the coin. Aizawa announced. Remember, stay in the 20-meter limit. You may start. The students started to dash into the forest, and it seemed that they all didn't want to do the triple amount of homework, and thought it would be best for all of them to work together to find the coin. As they disappeared into the forest, the vigilante hopped down from the tree and stood next to the hobo teacher. You didn't hide the coin, did you? The vigilante said as Aizawa turned to face him. The hobo man had his ESHT grin on and answered, nope. The teen sighed. I feel sorry for them. Sure, but you're not allowed to tell anyone. Aizawa replied as he was walking back into the building. It would be best if you go trail them, just in case that the villains start attacking us. The vigilante nodded and disappeared into the trees. Aizawa turned back to see if the teen was still there, only to see that he wasn't. Such as fast worker. He muttered to himself as he headed back inside the building. At least it's quiet. I wonder if they like my surprise. Hikari continued to jump from tree to tree. He was quite bored. He was jumping around looking for students to monitor until he heard a scream. Thinking it was an attack, the vigilante straight away headed in the direction ready to attack, but just found Jiro stuck underneath net. The girls with her saw her stuck and got the net off her. The vigilante remained in the shadows and watched the group of girls. What's this? Exclaimed Mina in surprise. Momo went up to the net and examined it. It was just an ordinary net, but it was set up in the middle of the forest. As she was examining it, she saw a piece of paper. The black-haired girl picked it up and read it out loud to her group. Yay, you found one of the traps that I have placed around the area. I have hidden them, so good luck finding the coin. Aizawa. Momo read out loud as the vigilante face palmed mentally. There was silence, but Momo broke it. It seems that finding the coin will be harder than we thought. Uraraka stated, we have to inform the boys before they dash. Then there were screams. Still thinking that there might be an attack, the vigilante rushed through the forest to get near the scream. Once he got there, it seemed that Kaminari had fallen down a deep hole. Again, the vigilante face palmed mentally and sighed. He hid in the trees and watched how it went from there. Why the hell is there a hole in the forest? Screamed Bakugo. Kirishima got down on his knees and looked down at the hole. Kamibro. Are you alright? Yeah, but it's dark down here. Answered the Pikachu in the hole. Can I have someone to get me out? Okay. Just wait a bit. Replied Kirishima as he went to the group and made a plan on how to get the stuck Pikachu out of the hole. Releasing some of his presence, Hikari only allowed Shinso to sense it, so the purple-haired teen faced up towards the trees. Todoroki, who noticed this, also faced the trees, but they both didn't see anything at first, but once they both focused real hard, they found the fox mask. The person in the trees signaled them to follow as he hopped tree to tree until they weren't far from the group, but they couldn't be heard by the others as well. Hikari, what are you doing here? Asked the dual-colored haired teen. Hikari sighed. I heard a scream and dashed here thinking there was an attack, but all I found was a group and a Pikachu stuck in a hole. Oh, but why call us here? Questioned the curious teen. I'm just here to tell you that there are more traps out here. Hikari simply stated. Be careful, Aizawa has hidden them. I knew it. If he has his ESHT grin, then there was something up. Exclaimed Shinso. Right. Hikari responded. Well, that was all I needed to tell you. I'll see you later. Todoroki grabbed the vigilante's wrist before he jumped into a tree. Wait. He said. Can you tell us where the coin is? I want to get this over and done with. The green-haired teen replied, I would if I could. Aizawa told me not to tell anyone. But I will tell. You this, you should spend more time with your peers more, both of you. You guys are loners. Be more like Kirishima. More outgoing and make friends. If there is nothing else, I will be going. Todoroki nodded and let go of his wrist, while Shinso was thinking of places where his father would try and hide the coin. Hikari disappeared into the darkness of the forest, as the other two returned to their group. As he was back to patrolling, he thought to himself. They will never get it, will they? The students continued to try to find the hidden coin and were caught in some traps along the way. They all looked through bushes and trees, but found nothing but traps. Some cursed their teacher as they were getting down or up from the trap. Some wanted to give up, but others reminded them that if they couldn't find it, they had to do triple amount of the homework. They would groan and complain, but in the end they would continue to look for the coin. Hikari kept sighing at the attempts that the class did. For him, he thought it was stupid, since he knew that Aizawa didn't even hide the coin, so it was meaningless. Though his job was to trail them, he had to watch the whole routine of one student getting caught in a trap, then the others helping them to get out, after that they would look for the coin and repeat. The vigilante continued to watch the students, but some of them had split off to cover more ground. He was with the girls as they were looking for the coin, but something else was going on. The smell of something burning was in the air. Facing towards the direction which it came, the teen saw a bright blue blaze. Blue flames were engulfing the forest. The girls had seemed to notice and all decided to head back to the building. They dashed towards the camp as the vigilante followed behind them. As they were heading their way there, the vigilante heard some screams. Hikari cursed under his breath and rushed towards the scream. At the scene, Tokoyami was losing control of Dark Shadow and was attacking his fellow peers. He was attacking Todoroki, Shinso and Shoji, who were the only ones with him. Laying on the ground was an unfamiliar facing. He seemed to be a villain, so the vigilante tied him up and made his top problem Tokoyami. The students were dodging the attacks, but Dark Shadow only got faster. Todoroki-kun! Shouted Hikari, catching all of their attention as they dodged the incoming attacks. Light a flame and make it shine towards Tokoyami-kun. Quickly! Todoroki quickly nodded and activated his left side. Flames lit up and Dark Shadow seemed to back down. It went back into Tokoyami, leaving him breathing on the ground with tears at the edge of his eyes. The other four crowded around him making sure that he was okay, which he was. After they all sighed in relief, Shoji and the Darkness Bird were in guard of the vigilante. Who are you? They asked. Hikari responded, no time to explain, but I'm on your side and I'm helping you. We should all go to the building so you can regroup. He ran in front of them and they had no choice but to follow him. The future heroes were having a chat while they ran. It was quiet, but the vigilante was still able to hear them. Can we trust this guy? Questioned the boy with a quirk for growing eyes and mouths. The sleep-driven boy nodded. He has helped us at the USJ and saved us, so why not now? But how do we know that wasn't for show? Replied the bird face. Well, I know him and so does Shinso. It should be fine. Todoroki countered. After all, he helped me with my problems. The two unsure boys looked to each other and decided to trust the newcomer for now, but he didn't have their full trust. Once they made it to the building, Aizawa was standing in front of the door with burn marks across his arms. It alarmed his students as they rushed towards them. Aizawa! Shouted Hikari as he rushed to check the wounds on the pro-hero. What happened? The hobo sighed out of frustration. I got hit by blue flames. As I was about to capture the one who threw them at me, he disappeared. He explained. I have to find the students and help them. Hikari, please guard this place. After hearing the vigilante's name, the two who never really talked to him, looked at the fox mask in disbelief. They never really trusted the guy, but their teacher seemed to know the stranger. The other two didn't care and wanted to help as well, but Aizawa refused their request. "I'm sorry, Eraserhead, but I cannot follow that instruction. You are injured and can probably look after your students and calm them down once they all are here," the green-haired teen said. He turned his back towards the five and walked towards a tree. "It would be best for you to guard your students and for me to capture these villains. After all, I can take them down. I can even escape you, so stay here." As he hopped onto a branch on a tree, Aizawa yelled his vigilante name as he disappeared into the forest. Aizawa once again sighed out of frustration, but listened to what the vigilante had said. He was the only pro-hero at the building, and since the fox mask said that he would get his problem children, then he hoped that everything would be fine. He headed into the building with 4 of his students behind him. As a figure was jumping tree from tree at a fast rate, sounds of a battle were going on around him. He decided to help out the ones closest to him, then more on to the next. He headed towards a tree and saw Uraraka and Azui fighting a blonde girl. Azui was stuck on a tree with a knife holding her hair in place, so she couldn't get down. Her tongue was cut and could only watch as Uraraka was facing off with the girl. The two seemed to be fighting for a long time, since they were both breathing. Uraraka had cuts all over her body and some of her clothes had been torn. The vigilante, who needed to get a move on, dropped down from the tree in front of Azui. It shocked the group of girls, and not wanting anyone to get a time to think, he swiftly dashed towards the villain girl and chalked her behind the neck, knocking her out. After regaining their serious expressions, the 2 UA students were on guard and ready to fight. The vigilante sighed as he tied up the blonde teen in his hands and walked over to the tree Azui was stuck on. She tried to make him stay away from her as far as possible, but it didn't work. Luckily, he was on their side and took the knife out of her hair, freeing her from the tree. "Go," he ordered. "Go to the building. Aizawa is there." Before getting a response, he was gone and left the villain girl with the 2 UA students, giving them the sign to take her with them to their teacher. They got the message and grabbed the blonde. They ran towards the building at high speed, not wanting to have to battle anyone else. As he continued to save students and tell them to go to the building, the forest was being eaten by the bright blue flames. It was only growing and feasting on the trees. The smell of smoke was getting into the system and it wasn't doing anything good for his vision. He knew that he had to get out of there, but there was still one group that he didn't save yet, and that group had the person who they were targeting. Katsuki Bakugo. He was still somewhere in the forest with Kirishima, Shiro and Kaminari. The vigilante searched for the 4, but there was still no luck. He heard a distant scream that he remembered from before. It was Kaminari's, and the vigilante immediately turned directions. As he dashed towards the scream, he could only think of one thing. "Kaken, you better be safe." Reaching the scream, it was an opening. There was a cave, and the vigilante saw the group of 4 with a black-haired kid. There was a villain knocked out against the wall and other villains were closing in on them. The kid was at the back of the group, as if they were protecting him. They all had panicked expressions on their faces, but the teens tried their best to stay calm. As Hikari continued to stare at the kid, he remembered that the boy was Mandalay's nephew. Cursing as the villains were closing in on the group, the green-haired teen jumped in between the 2 groups. Eyes widened at his arrival as both groups were on guard. Hikari had his back towards the heroes and glared at the villains. There was a moment of silence, until Kirishima recognized the newcomer. Kirishima cheered as he dropped his guard for the vigilante in green and black. His friends looked towards him as the villains were in confusion. "You know him?" asked Shiro as they all faced the redhead for answers. Kirishima grinned and replied, "Yeah. He helped me with my training a few days ago. He also knows Todoroki and Shinso. So, he's on our side." The heroes sighed in relief at the answer Kirishima had given, but Bakugo was still cautious. He eyed the back of the vigilante and was still on guard. Hikari started to get ready for battle as he grabbed a mental stick, which grew into a long pole as the same size of him. All of the UA students' eyes widened. They remembered the weapon the person who saved them at the USJ used to protect them from the Nomu. You were the one who helped us at the USJ. Kirishima whispered. Hikari answered without looking back to them, does that matter? Hurry up and get out of here. But. No buts. You can't tell us what to do. Bakugo yelled, silencing the argument between Kirishima and Hikari. We will stay and fight. No. You will not. Hikari shouted back as he faced towards the students. They are after a student. They want to kidnap them and use them for whatever they want. Bakugo fumed and screamed, well, then. We can protect them and they should be able to protect themselves, Shut up. You will return to the building. Especially you, Katsuki Bakugo. Hikari countered as the villains were just watching in confusion at that was happening at that moment. Bakugo stiffened. He didn't know why, but his name coming out of the vigilante's mouth felt foreign and wrong. There was silence until Kaminari and his stupid and unnecessary question came in. Why Bakugo especially? He asked as all the attention was drawn towards him. A sigh escaped from the fox mask as a hand touched it like a facepalm. Because he is the one they want to kidnap. There were gasps from the hero group as there were questions from the villains. Like, where did you get that information from? And how did you know about that? But they were ignored by the broccoli boy. You understand. Hikari said as he went to face the villains. If you continue to be here, then how can the heroes protect you? Aizawa is at the building, so he will protect you. All the rest of your classmates are at the building, so hurry up and go. I refuse. Bakugo stated calmly as he crossed his arms. Bakubro. Come on. Let's go. Kirishima yelled, but Bakugo didn't move. He spoke. If they want me, then I will fight. What happens if you die? Asked Kaminari in a panicked voice. Then I die. Bakugo simply stated. That statement got Hikari mad. The vigilante turned around and slapped Bakugo in the face, surprising everyone else. You die. You die. What will you accomplish when you die, huh? What would your parents think? What about your friends? What about finding Izuku Midoriya? Are you just going to give up? At the mention of a familiar name, Bakugo looked directly at the fox mask with a glare. How do you know that name? The vigilante scoffed. The boy who was quirkless and got bullied and nearly gave up on his dreams, but didn't thanks to you. Oh, I may have met him once, or twice, but what would he think after your death, HM? Ever thought of that? You met him. Bakugo questioned as he dropped the glare at the vigilante. Kirishima butted in and asked, who are you talking about? Bakugo muttered, my missing childhood friend. Well, then. Zero said. You can't die since you still have to look for him. Now come on Bakugo. Bakugo continued to stare at the vigilante and clicked his tongue. He unfolded his arms and turned his back towards the villains and vigilante. Before leaving, Bakugo took a glance back towards the vigilante and demanded, after this, we need a little chat, V. Sure. Answered the vigilante as he turned his attention towards the villains. They seemed annoyed, since they were ignored for, like 10 minutes. Now, I'm sorry for the little pause, but now we can start. With that sentence, the group of villains rushed towards the single team with their quirks activated and weapons in hand. Meanwhile, as the vigilante was facing off with the villains, the wild PP cats had just finished wrapping up the villains that they dealt with, and were heading back to the building. They had got a message from Aizawa that students were back at the camp building, except a certain 4, but Hikari was searching for them. The smoke was in their systems and it was dangerous for them to continue battling for longer and knew that it would be the same for the vigilante, but he had a mask, so it would be less than what they were dealing with. As they were dashing to the building, they saw a group of children. There were 4 teens and a small child in the black-haired teen's arms. As they got closer to the group, they saw the missing students and Koda. They also spotted the wild PP cats, so they all regrouped. "What are you doing here?" asked Tiger as they ran with them to the building. "We're heading back to the building," answered Zero. Mandalay looked around and didn't see a certain someone. "Where's Hikari?" The students looked confused. "Who's Hikari?" Pixie Bob explained. A vigilante that wears green and black and has a fox mask." There was a moment of silence before Kaminari yelled, "That was the infamous vigilante Hikari." "But that doesn't make sense." Kirishima said his name was V. Ragdoll sighed. "That's what he calls himself when he introduces himself to students, I guess." "But yes, that was Hikari," she confirmed as the building was in their sight. "He's working with Nizu to gather information on the LOV and other villains. Thanks to that, we knew that the villains would be attacking the camp and trying to kidnap Bakugo, but didn't know when." Mandalay continued. "He has been patrolling the area every day and night to make sure that the villains weren't attacking. Today was the last day, so they had to be attacking today, so Aizawa set up traps around the forest to protect the building and decided to also play with you at the same time. The traps were supposed to capture the villains and buy time for all of us to escape," explained Pixie Bob. After the explanation, they all had reached the building and saw Aizawa inside, but in front of the door. Seeing them, he let them in and locked the door. All of them made it into the living room and saw all the students were there. "Thank goodness everyone is all right," exclaimed Momo as she saw all of her classmates' faces. "But how will we escape? I mean, we can't stay here forever." Aizawa felt a ping in his pocket and exited out of the room. It didn't get unnoticed by some students. Shinso, Todoroki and Bakugo saw him leave while staring at his phone, but didn't bother to follow him. When Aizawa exited the room, he looked down at his phone and saw that he got a message. It was from Hikari. It simply said, "Escape. I have all the villains where I am. I will catch up later." Hikari, as he finished reading the message, he cursed under his breath and shoved his phone into his pocket. He walked back into the room and all the attention was on him. "All right, we have to go now," Aizawa announced. The students were shocked at the sudden order to escape and some even tried to complain, but Aizawa shut them all down with a glare. "Shut up and go. This may be our only chance." There was silence and no one spoke, trying to figure out what their teacher meant, but Todoroki seemed to catch on, along with another 2 students. "You don't mean," the 3 students muttered, but since it was silent, people were able to hear. Understanding what they were implying, Aizawa sighed and only nodded. The 3 students, which were Todoroki, Shinso and Bakugo, rushed towards the door, but was stopped by their teacher. "And where do you think you're going?" asked Aizawa as he dragged them back to the rest of the class. "We have to help Hikari," Shinso stated. The statement brought widened eyes from his classmates. Some were whispering between themselves, until Kirishima asked worriedly, "Why do we have to help V? Also, why would the vigilante Hikari be here?" Ida asked as he pushed up his glasses. Bakugo yelled as he explained to the class what was going on. "Are you F stupid? Who do you think F saved your shitty asses and told us to meet here? Then we hear that we can F escape. Don't you think this is a bit suspicious? It's because the shitty person who saved our F asses was the shitty vigilante and he is holding OFF the motherfucking villains to let us escape." Once again, there was silence. But there was a lot of shocked expressions throughout the room. Some were thinking that they were saved by a vigilante and others thinking that he was facing all the villains on his own. They were going to be heroes in a few years' time, yet they were running away from the fight. They were all determined to help the vigilante and it was shown in their eyes. Aizawa immediately stopped them and the wild PP cats helped him to do so. The students frowned at their actions and tried to push past the pro-heroes, but it didn't work. You're not allowed to help him. Aizawa said as the students' frowns deepen. He has put his life on the line to get us out of here, yet you're making his pain and suffering worthless. There was a pause in the hallways and Kirishima spoke up. We can't just leave him here. He helped us and saved us twice. Once at the USJ and now here. We can get out of this together when we work all together. Aizawa shouted, wake up. That won't do. You see heroes die even if they work with others. It's fine that you thought about teaming up, but the world isn't fair. What if your plan fails and kills a classmate or a friend? You can't save everyone. We are going back to UA and we can wait for him there. There was no place for complaints, so the students did what they were told and headed onto a spare bus that was left for this attack. Everyone felt guilty for leaving the vigilante by himself, but it was still late at night. Everyone was tired and the students slept on the bus. While in the middle of driving, Tiger asked, weren't you a little harsh on them? Nonsense. They have to learn how the work works at one point to become a hero. Now just happened to be the perfect time. Aizawa replied in his sleeping bag with a shadow over his eyes. Though I did call for other heroes and police to get there and met with Hikari, so as long as he stays alive until they get there, he should be fine. Mandalay nodded. He is a vigilante who was able to survive battling villains and heroes for a long time, so he shouldn't have a huge problem, hopeful. After the conversation, some of the heroes slept, while two of them would take turns driving and keeping watch. They reached UA in a matter of hours, so they hopped off there and sent the students home. Though the students were happy to be home, they were covered in guilt and regret.